good charger. So, chapter 4. Okay, let's see where I'm at. Operation and lock. So I gotta go straight up. Damn. Hold on, y'all. Let me change this. Hold on one second. Probably won't be too long, y'all. Okay. All right, chapter 4. Here we go. I have been reading this book right here, y'all. I got a lot of good books. Way here, like on page what 221. I probably won't be reading that to y'all because I'm way on 221. Anyway, okay. Creeping Things, chapter 4. Okay. The sight of the rose petal jarred me so much that I jumped awake. When I opened my eyes in the waking world, the air was cool with deep, let me get situated, with night, deep night, and I was alone under a blanket, but not alone in the wagon. Across from me, leaned against the sideboard, broad shoulders slumped, arms resting on his knees, head hanging forward. He was definitely asleep. No one else was with us. We weren't moving. I turned my head, cushioned on empty feed sacks, and heard logs snapping and saw the soft glow of a campfire through the wagon's hid covering. Naren, Nyaren, was probably right outside. I had no idea where we were, but we traveled far enough that there was no evidence of the inferno that had been my home. Naren was likely keeping watch out there, and Ramses in here. The bottle of Mohol, Mohol, sat at its side, and his handkerchief folded by it. It was too dangerous to give the sleeping drug to a person already under its influence. They might never awaken. So he probably supposed to catch the signs that I was coming around. Ramsey had tied my wrist with proper rope, probably for my comfort, a kindness I would make sure he regretted, though he'd also bound my ankles, even with hands before me. It would have been impossible to free myself without my mother's gift. Oh shit! Oh, yeah. Trying to do my hair, child. Leave me alone. I had to go through quite contortions, but I was able to reach into my bodance, Bodice, and pull out the slim wooden handled pocket knife she'd given me for my 10th birthday. It was made for a man's pocket, of course, not my makeshift one, but my mother had always insisted I carry it nestled between my breasts. My mother had trained me well. If not for this exact scenario, I knew how to move silently, how to trick people in darkness, and how to free myself without looking. My hands contorted again to pop open the blade. I slipped it between my wrists and saw at my bindings. With the tension and the sharpness of the blade, the rope parted like string. Carefully drawing my knees to my chest, I made short work of the ties around my ankles too. My skirt went next. The silk was lightweight, meaning for the heat of the day, but voluminous, and it would only sag or slow me down. It was barely attached in the front, where it had ripped at the waist as I fell into Ramsey's arms. I finished it off, leaving only the thin lining beneath, which was fortunately as dark as the rest of the dress, the better to move unseen. Slowly, barely breathing, I slid slid out of the skirt and out from under the blanket. Ramsey hadn't moved. Using my arms for support, I pulled myself into a crouch in front of him. I kept my eyes on his face as I picked up the bottle of sleeping stuff, glancing down only long enough to pour a good deal of it into the handkerchief. Then, in the same moment I would use to smash a fly between my palms, I clapped one hand behind his head and the cloth over his nose, the mouth holding tight. I wasn't sure if he ever awoke. He jerked once as if trying to respond, but then slumped more heavily than before. I laid his head down slowly so as not to make a thump. For half a second I considered cutting his throat with the knife, but I didn't know if the medicine would keep him under for that, and if I fumbled, it might wake up he might wake up screaming, or simply thrash in his sleep, and then I would be discovered. Besides, I'd already seen too much blood tonight. I never killed anyone or anything, never mind someone I tried to pretend was my brother for my entire life, someone whom I'd both played tricks on and laughed with, who both pulled my hair and once held my hand all the way back to the willow when I skinned my knee running through the jungle. I almost couldn't recognize this hardened, vicious side of myself. She was new, born just hours before the fire and blood. Moving quietly and carefully, I harped my skirt and some feed sacks under the blanket in the appropriate shape of a body. If anybody peeked in, I hoped the scene would look as before, both of us asleep, me under the blanket. Then I crept to the front corner of the wagon, farthest from the light of the fire and the laced up exit at the back. Slicing the head covering was slower, but also quieter than I expected. It was under tension too, fitted tightly to the arching frame of the wagon bed. It parted with only a whisper, but required a lot of pressure. If my hands weren't already in agony, they would have been by the time I cut a slit back big enough for my shoulders to slip through. The night air was fresh, cool, and alive, insects buzzing loud enough to mask any sound I made. My arms shook as I used all my strength to silently lower myself to the ground alongside one of the front wheels. Thank the gods we were still in the coastal forest, not exposed among the frequent expanse of sandy hills that were farther north and inland. It took all I had of a different kind of strength not to blot through the shadows and to the surrounding trees, where I would find cover, but no doubt crash around loud enough to rise someone. Not that I couldn't even hope for Naren to be asleep. Someone had been feeding the fire. No, I needed to move without dead twigs snapping underfoot or rustling on the brush, and that meant following the narrow road we were traveling. The way we'd been heading was the easiest route since the fire was behind the wagon. I sent a silent prayer to Hazra, Heshara, to keep me hidden, touched the horse's neck as I passed so as not to startle it, and then began to move faster. My heart was beating so loudly I could hear it against my eardrums. Once the wagon and the fire were torches blow behind me, I broke into a leaping run, landing on the balls of my feet first, so my steps wouldn't pound. I ran like that for as long as my lungs held out until the aches, arches of my feet cramped, my calves burned, my tongue was parched. I was grasping to hostile for comfort. Only then did I duck off the road and make my way into the trees. The firelight, long swallowed by the darkness of the woods behind me. The air grew heavier and hummed under the canopy, muffling any noise I made and singing with life. Unfortunately, my surroundings also felt alive. I groped my way forward with each step, one arm stretched out and down to gentle part of the fern, and other undergrowth, and other held up in front of my face to part the veins and spider webs. So many spider webs. I hated spiders. Several times something crawled along my arms or shoulders, and I hastily batted it away. And there were creeping things other than spiders. Something large danced across my ankle once, maybe a snake or a giant caterpillar. I took deep breaths and focused on stepping forward, stepping carefully, not on my skin crawling. Besides, how could I let insects affect me after what I've just been through? No, don't think about that. But it was too late. My my eyes started to swim, blurring the looming shapes of the forest around me, as if it wasn't hard enough to see already. I gritted my teeth and dashed away my tears. You can cry later. Right now you have to move. That was what my mother would tell me to do. I could particularly hear her voice in my head. Move, Kamara. Eventually it wasn't tears that made my eyes blur, and nothing could keep my eyelids from drooping, not creeping things, or even fear of pursuit. It was the lingering effect of the medicine, or likely that I was dead exhausted. I had to stop. Through the shadows up ahead, I spotted a drowned, drowned, downed tree covered in moss. I would lie on the other side of the trunk, tuck myself out of view of anyone coming this way, and sleep. I wished I could lie on top to keep off the ground, but then I might as well serve myself up on a platter for whoever came along. Better the bugs find me, or so I thought. Low to the ground, my foot kicked into something without much resistance, like a spider web. But unlike a spider web, it came alive and attacked me as soon as I broke it apart. Within seconds, whatever I disturbed swamped up my foot and then my legs. Ants. I kicked a tunnel. Oh, damn. It wasn't a tunnel made of dirt. I seen them moving at dusk through the forest, ringing our villa, creating walls out of their own warriors' bodies to move their unhatched young safely within. The whole colony would fort a miniature black river winding over the sand and through the trees, often farther than my eyes could trace. The warriors linked with their jaws outward, so every bit of the living structure literally had teeth. I'd once poked one with a stick just for fun, and had to drop the stick when the warriors lashed on, breaking formation to funnel up in a furious storm. Now my body was the stick, and in seconds I was covered in ants, pinching, biting, stinging ants. My skin burned like fire. I couldn't help it, and I screamed. It didn't make me feel any better, nor did running in circles and beating at my skin. I screamed again as the ants began to slash my neck and face. Savage. If a light hadn't flared in the trees behind me, I may have just collapsed right there and succumbed to death. Instead, I ran for the light, not caring who it was. It was toward the road, but the opposite direction of the wagon at least. Even so, it could have been Ramsey with the torch, and I still would have ran to him and pleaded for help. Such was the pain. It wasn't Ramsey's or Narrett, but the sight of half-dozen men carrying lanterns and swords, bare steel glinting in the darkness, was enough to make me pause. I dropped to the sand ground behind some bushes, ignoring the pain as best I could, trying not to make any noise even though I wanted to keep screaming. If I had managed to the agony of seeing my mother killed in silence, I could do this. I stuffed my fist in my mouth and bit down on it hard enough to draw blood, while I used my other hand to swap at my face and neck. Damn, nothing happened. I was burning to death, like I almost had in the villa, and yet these men might complete the job if I didn't keep quiet. Over there, said a voice. I heard rustling. Could be an ambush by whoever started the fire. That lad had a strange look about him. He could have been lying. No, a girl was screaming, a female voice. They weren't all men. I almost cried out and gave myself away. Thought I wasn't sure why. A woman was just as capable of deceit as a man. Maybe it was that I wanted to hear a different woman's voice, my mother's, so very badly. This voice sounded younger, raising to call, whoever it is, don't be afraid. We're only looking for someone, a girl, to help her. Jadaros Nunma sent us from the capital to find his daughter, Kamara. We're here to bring her to him. Okay, go to your father. It's the only place that will be safe. Between my mother's urgent instructions and the use of my father's name, I doubted that this was a trick. It was enough for me, at least, to leap up and fling myself right into the middle of them. All my pain and fear came pouring out of me in a form of wailing and waving arms. Ants, get them off me. For a second they looked startled, like I was a ghost who had come winging out of night. Then they all plunged into action. In a matter of seconds, swords were dropped. Several men were battling at my arms and legs and hair, and a woman was tearing at the ties in my bondage to loosen it. Normally, I would have shed away in horror, but at the moment I was happy to help her undo them. Ranta's tilts, tits, they're all over her, one man exclaimed. Ouch, one bit me. Think how bad it must be for her. Now watch your language. Give me your canteens and don't look. The woman barked at the others. Awkwardly, a couple of men sidled forward with their eyes averted, holding out their offerings as she dropped my bondage down around my shoulders. A woman took the canteen from them and unceremoniously dumped them over my head, splashed water over my face, neck, and chest, washed most of the ants away. The rest she carefully picked away as she spotted them, crushing them between her fingers. I, I helped as best I could. My usual pale skin, wet in the warm glow of lantern light, was angry red and covered in welts. You must be Camilla, the woman murmured. All I could do was give her a nod. You have his nose, she said. Once the top half of me was clear, the woman tugged my bondage up to cover me, passed the ties into my hands, and halted my slip. Let me get your legs. More splash of water. more like punches of her fingertips against my thighs and calves. I didn't feel the slightest bit awkward, not even when I noticed one of the men grinning at the sight of the woman down on her knees in front of me. Dirty mind. Half under my dark shaft shift with a lantern, lighting it up from within. I just thought he was an idiot. Needing help, he asked, his tone innocent. I glared, but my watery eyes probably ruined the effect. Shed it, the woman snapped, and his grin turned sheepish. When she finally pulled away, she had to smooth down her short brown hair, muscle in my skirt. She looked to be in her early 20s, and while her jaw was square, her nose slightly crooked, and her brown cheeks clapped by the sun, she suddenly looked like the loveliest person in the whole of Ethiopia to me. All right, she asked. I almost wanted to laugh and say, no, I'm not all right, but at least ants are no longer eating me alive. Instead, I started crying, hug, breathless snob, huge breathless snob. They spoke, they shook my entire body. There, come on then. The young woman patted me awkwardly. The men were suddenly scouting the trees, sniffing their feet and checking their swords, happy to leave the crying girl to a woman. Not that she looked or acted a whole lot like any woman I ever met. Tall, no curves or softness to speak of, all lean muscle and mortal movements. I've heard of women, even seen a few, who were guards or soldiers and act more like men, but never one who seemed to be giving the orders. Let's get you to the carriage and to your father, she said. Carriage where? She pointed through the trees. It's over there. It's right over there in the road. I'm Nikia, head of your father's household guard, and he sent us when he got word of, well, never mind the fact that she was a woman. She seemed remarkably young to be in charge, especially of a bunch of older men, but I didn't have long to consider it. My eyes were swimming again. My mother, I said, my voice breaking. Nakia's eyes grew grim. We're not sure what happened, only that your father received a massive, that his daughter's one, Kimara, was in danger. Never mind that none of us were aware he had a daughter. When we arrived at the location he gave us, the place was embers. You're some ways away from there, in the opposite direction of the capital. So we're lucky we found you. We were about to turn around. We only thought you might have gone this way by accident if you hadn't, if you weren't, if you weren't, if I weren't embers like everything else. I suddenly remembered Ramsey, and the danger that was still out there. Did you see a covered wagon? Let's see how much is out there. Okay. She must have heard the fear in my voice because her gaze sharpened. The others were looking my way now, too. Yes, we passed one, with a man dead drunk in the back, and another dozing his fire. He seemed suspicious, but said he'd seen no sign of a long girl or even a rider. We carried on a bit farther because we didn't like the look of him, and that's when we heard your screams. He's lying. I think they helped start the fire, though there were lots of other men too. I didn't want to say soldiers. And then the two of them kidnapped me. I was in a wagon, but I ran. Swords were immediately in hand again. Maybe a few of us should go look for them, one of the men said darkly. Nakia frowned. No, they're probably long gone, and we need to get her back. They're not our business. She turned to me. Do you know who they are? I shook my head. I couldn't tell them that Ramsey was supposedly my stepbrother because I would have had to explain why he was kidnapping me, and that would lead to the Twilight Guard and too many dangerous secrets. My mother might have known, but she didn't make it out of the house. Luckily, my choked voice disguised the rage and disgust in what I said next. I don't think my stepbrother did either, which was true in a sense. He was no longer my stepbrother or pretend or practice or whatever or otherwise. And Helen, my stepfather, I heard one of the attackers say he was dead. Okay. Nakia put her hand on my shoulder. A carriage was ambushed between your villa and the Capitol. Both the drivers and passenger pulled to the side of the road and beheaded. Wow. I think the passenger was Helen Lazar. I'm sorry. Beheaded. Helen's deep voice, his sharp eyes, wet mouth, all served from the rest of him. I know he was dead, but to hear how mad bile rots in my throat. Why? I cried, even though I probably knew more than she did. At least she had done it. At least she had done it. The Twilight Guard. I think your father will be able to explain better than I can, she said hastily. Let's get you home. Home. My home was ash, but I nodded anyway. They didn't. I had to swallow. Those two men in the wagon. They didn't know where we were going, right? No, the man asked who we worked for, but I told him it was none of his business. You'll be safe. That wouldn't necessarily stop Ramsey or Twilight Guard from figuring out where I'd gone. My mother said the guard had members tucked everywhere, from the poorest alleyways to the king's court. Safe, the word felt as hollow as home. Sleep came despite my burning skin and the nickling of the horses, and most especially despite the worry that even though Ramsey's wagon was indeed gone, he would somehow come after me. My head tipped slowly, dripping into Nakia's arm. I couldn't help it, and she was already asleep anyway, so I didn't think she would mind. Nakia's soul was surprisingly expansive. I already knew that a person's soul didn't often match their body in the waking world, but the difference here was more drastic than usual. Nakia wasn't what I would have called beautiful, but her soul was. It was like a treehouse, wooden floors winding through different levels and passages, smooth branches twining the walls in intricate patterns. That's nice. The entry of it glowed like polished furniture in firelight. I should have just left it and drifted into dreams. Instead, I looked around, my anger and despite building. It was beautiful, but it was not my mother's. My mother should have been the one to tend my wounds. Here should Hers should have been the shoulder I leaned upon. This should have been her soul. Her soul was the closest thing I had to a soul of my own, and now I would never see it again. These sandstone walls are the greatest loss to me than those who had shared in the waking world. I felt like a physical pain in my chest, enough to nearly double me over. Oh, that about 3 minutes. Hope I can get through this. Sorry, y'all. I need a charger. As I mentioned, if y'all want to donate, I appreciate it. I think it's like $7, $8. Where I stop at? Those sandstone walls were a greater loss to me than those who had shared in the waking world. It felt like physical pain in my chest, enough to nearly devil me over. I truly was no better than an empty shell, what I had always feared. I had lost everything. I only had a father's name. My mother had said neither of us would likely be pleased to meet each other, so why go to him? I wasn't even sure why I bothered escaping other than to spite Ramsay. Spite was all I had left to fill me. The black door appeared then as I summoned by my dark mood, drawing the color and warmth and gleam from the wooden wall. I laughed at the perfect timing. And why not? I thought. What did I have to lose? My mother had told me never to open it, but now she was dead, and I had nothing else. A small, petty part of me was furious at her for dying and wanted to go get back at her, even if it killed me. Maybe especially if it killed me. Besides, how could something that had given me a rose petal be that dangerous? Perhaps if I had my own soul to give me somewhere to go as I slept. Perhaps if my mother weren't dead. Perhaps if she had told me what was happening behind the door, what would happen behind the door. Perhaps when I wouldn't have opened it, but I took the sleek, warm doorknob in my hand and turned it, so much hanging on something too so small. The door opened soundlessly, though I could feel the density of its heavy black material. Was it wood or stone or something else, pushing against me as if it had been waiting for my touch? My mother's voice came back to me. It wants the door to open it, like a large animal's head nudging against the hand of a child. The power was startling, unbalancing, its friendliness dubious. Uncertainty and fear flickered through me like a candle flame, sparking back to life. But it was too late. The door swung wide and the way stood open. Whoa. Next time we read Open Doors, chapter 5. Okay. All right, y'all. Like, subscribe, share, and comment. I really appreciate it. Feeling generous. Get the girl, little donation. I love y'all. Bye. Go to my other channel, Lies Magazine, LIARS Magazine, and description box. Want to donate and give me a like, okay? And do tarot on that line, on the other one. All right, love y'all. Bye.